to episode 10 of Big Happy Life. I'm your host, Natalie Britt, and this week we're talking about whether or not your weakness is actually an overplayed strength. This topic follows on from what we were talking about last week, which was feedback, because of course feedback generally does highlight our strengths and weaknesses. But I have a theory about weaknesses, and that is that they're either overplayed, misplayed, or misperceived strengths. What does that mean? Put the behavior in a different context or different situation, and you have a strength. Move it, do too much of it, or interact with someone who doesn't value it, and you have a weakness, or a perceived weakness. In my corporate work, this is the kind of thing I'm very often drawing people's attention to. So imagine somebody who's worked as part of a team for a really long time, and one of the things they do incredibly well is gain consensus amongst the group. Then they get promoted and they become the manager. And suddenly, the consensus is seen as weakness, it's indecisiveness. Same strength, different context, different perception, different label. Which is ultimately what we're really talking about when we talk about strengths and weaknesses. They're positive and negative labels on usually neutral behavior. In the vast majority of cases, the behavior itself is neither good nor bad. It's just whether or not it works in context. And there are thousands of examples like this, not just in the workplace, but also in our wider lives, in our home lives, or going from work to our home life and playing the strengths in both. Imagine the CEO of a company, the one who has to make decisions that people aren't always happy about, the one who has to cut through the noise, get to the heart of an issue, get things done as fast as possible, as efficiently as possible. What if, instead of bringing those skills to the boardroom, she brings them to a board game with her child? Probably not massive fun for the kid. What about the cutthroat lawyer, the one who can win any case you put in front of him? He can tear any argument apart. Bring that skill into his marriage. What happens to the marriage? What happens to the relationship? I think most of us do our best when we feel good about ourselves. And for me, that's what this concept does. It can reframe criticism, negative feedback, and the labels we put on ourselves so that they serve a better purpose. I think there's real benefit in looking at not changing ourselves, but thinking about when we play certain strengths and when the context requires something different. Then it becomes more about adaptability, observation, curiosity, relationship building, than it does about self-criticism or self-judgment and labels. So that's what I'd encourage you to think about over the course of this week, is if you get any negative feedback or you start kind of labeling yourself with those, I'm indecisive, or I'm a procrastinator, or I'm flighty, or bossy, moody, pessimistic, any of those things that we use to label ourselves and define our capabilities and ultimately determine what's possible and what's not possible. What if you were to look at what the strength is and where it actually works, and then look at what's different in the context where you start applying those labels and consider, what is it about this situation that makes my strength not play well, and what should I do differently? Now the label becomes irrelevant and the situation becomes the important thing. It's not about who you are or what you can do or what label you'd place on yourself. It's you in context. What does the situation require? What is the desired outcome? Who else is involved and what do they need? And then you shape your choices accordingly. Of course, these things are easier said than done, and it'll take a good few podcasts to cover the type of ground we need to cover in order to examine all of the different ways that might be possible. But for this week, let's just start with awareness and noticing where and how those labels apply in your life and how they're shaping what you see as things you're good at or bad at, and how those things are shaping what's possible or not possible for you. You'll find a summary of everything I've talked about here on the show notes page, as well as a few extra little bits. And of course, I'd love to hear from you with comments or questions. In the meantime, that's it for this week, and thanks for listening.